Oh, thank you. This just looks so fabulous up on that screen.
Very beautiful.
Yes, I did. The first time I saw it, actually, I saw it in a link on my laptop. But let me just say that we all said, yes, this is great, seeing it on a link on a laptop. So we didn't need to see it on the big screen, but it's beautiful to see its beauty. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, but then we'll throw it out to you, so get your questions ready. There are so many layers to this. But why don't we sort of start at how you constructed this? I don't necessarily want to get into, what is constructed dialogue, what is not. Is it all constructed dialogue? Maybe you can start by talking about, the genesis of making this particular film and telling these stories.
I sort of went into it with a really simple story about this woman who lives alone is okay with her life and sort of has this young kid move in next door and realizes that maybe she's not as okay with her life as she thought that she was. Just in the fact that she maybe never had kids for whatever reason. So that was sort of the basic premise of the movie. And then I had known this poet, Paul, for a long time in Minneapolis, and so I always wanted to add him into the story, and I thought it was interesting if he sort of showed up in her life, and that made her realize even more that there's something missing that she wasn't necessarily aware of before. But that was basically what I wanted to get across, and I think I've always had a hard time watching films. I'm not really a film watcher from way back, maybe necessarily, and I think a lot of that has to do with the way that normal narratives are constructed. I don't really see that existing in life. I mean, it's a weird way of understanding the world where there's a start and a stop and a beginning and a middle and an end. And I was sitting on an airplane the other day, and I was sitting next to this guy who was watching this beautiful video on his iPhone of like a kid's birthday party or something, and it was really loud. He had the sound turned on, and I don't even think he realized it. He was staring out the window and like so engrossed in this iPhone video. And I was sitting like in the seat next to him, and I had everyone within arm's distance of me tapping me on the shoulder, being like, "You gotta tell this guy to turn off his video." And to me, I was just thinking, like, what if this guy's, like, kid died? Or what if, like, something weird has happened in this man's life? And I think that's sort of the way that I ended up going about shooting this movie, is that when I see something like that, I'm saying, what is the background behind all of this? And I think all of the moments in the movie don't necessarily tell you what they're about, but you sort of get a sense of this place and the way that humans go through life by picking up little glimpses along the way.
Yeah, you're sort of seeing things and thinking what else is going behind a door, or or on the other side of the camera, or just out of frame, and things like that. Now that's very interesting. Maybe then we can also talk about so Paul, who's a poet who came in and played a role, and of course Alice Karposky is there in the film. Are there any other people that are professional actors? Did everyone else come from, and this is your hometown, yes? This small town in, what's the name of it?
It's called Kalispell, Montana, but it's sort of a valley in this mountainous area.
In this whole area.
Yeah.
So is everyone else from the town, or did you do any other kind of casting?
I went into it thinking I would cast everyone in the film from the town that I grew up in, but it didn't exactly work out that way. I mean, I had Paul in mind, and I cast a few people that fell through right at the last minute for the lead roles, but I ended up finding Hillary, who's the younger woman. She's an old friend of mine from Minnesota and a photographer who takes beautiful photos. And she was in my student films when I used to make movies, so I thought she would be great, and we're really comfortable with each other and know a lot about each other, so I thought it would be perfect to have her. And then Liz, who's the older woman in the movie, is also from Minneapolis, but non-actress. I mean, no one in the film is an actor besides Alex.
Well, they did just a fabulous job, I have to say.
First timers all around.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody, let's see, any questions to start, to come out? Anybody? Okay, well, if there, We'll give them more time to. Oh, wait a minute. There's somebody there. I was going to give them more time to think, but yes, right there in the middle.
How did you decide to shoot on 16 millimeter?
Yes, talk about shooting on 16 millimeter.
We've always gone into all the projects that we've done. I've worked with the same people for many years, and I think we always try to shoot on film as much as possible. I think there's something really nice about it. It feels really special when you're doing it, and you're very focused on what you're doing while you're shooting. You can't just roll forever, and it's nice in a situation like this where we're going into situations where we don't necessarily have control of every element, to be able to focus like that. And I've also worked with the DP for a long time, so I felt like he was going to be able, I would be standing in a corner going, oh my gosh, are you getting this thing? And then I'd turn around and he would be in the right place at the right time, so.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you bring that up, too, because the idea of shooting on film, which is so rare these days, thank you for doing that, is the idea that, yes, you can't just turn it on and go, let's just shoot lots of stuff and then see what happens. So is this entire thing storyboarded? I mean, but you also had a script, and was this all there at the beginning, and how much came as you were making the film?
We had a full script, but I always knew that we would be sort of, it was a strange dance along the way. We were adding in things as we went, but it was also sort of tied to the script in a nice way that it was open enough to be able to pick up things, but also would be grounded in at least something that would make sense in the end. So yeah, that's where we started.
Yes?
Yeah, I guess I was just curious about kind of what your sort of production workflow was like. Like, how did you organize the shoot? Was it like kind of by location, sort of let's go here, sort of shoot these scenes here, or was it kind of like a more traditional production?
So, well, that's interesting, yes, about the production and how you determined how you would shoot, when you would shoot.
Over what period of time?
Oh, yeah, and that's a really good question. Yeah, how long did this all take?
I was in Montana for a couple months before we started shooting by myself, so I did the producing and all of that fun stuff and finding locations and everything. And it was pretty traditional in that way. I had set up locations with people and would say we'll show up at this time and we're going to put on a talent show in the Elks Club or something like that. And we'd have extras come. But then there are also scenes where, like at the racetrack, my brother drives race cars and my sister as well. So we would go into a scene like that saying, Adam, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. If they win, this thing could happen. If this happens, like everyone will probably rush that way. So we would say this is like we want them to break up in this scene, and then we would go to the location and sort of figure out the best way to make that happen. So it wasn't necessarily storyboarded, but I think we always knew what we had to get.
And those kinds of things, like with the races, you knew when they were, so that was sort of on your schedule as when you would shoot those kinds of things.
Yeah, everything was scheduled out. It wasn't like we would just wake up and say, where do you want to go today? And what should we, It was definitely a traditional, like, movie schedule.
And you organized a talent show? It didn't just...
Yeah, we organized a talent show. I had, like, a dance teacher contact me in the beginning, and so I met all of these girls who were dancers, so they ended up coming, and yeah.
They were wonderful. And now, did you cast, or did you actually do the guy? What is he doing? The karate moves?
Oh, that's my favorite guy in the world, Charles. We found him along the way. He's also the guy in the phone booth who gets the girl in the end. And everywhere we'd go, he would hit on every girl that we saw and tell her she had beautiful eyes. The girl at the coffee stand, the girl everywhere. So he has the most incredible life story. I could go on and on about it. It recently ended up with him living in a cult in LA briefly and disappearing for like 3 months, and then we heard from him out of nowhere. So he's got quite the story.
See who I gave the earrings to the girl? Is that?
Yeah, he's the one with the earrings, yeah.
Well, see, and that's lovely how you shoot these things too, is this idea of you're saying, yeah, these little storylines, they don't necessarily go like this, you just catch glimpses, and at the end you just see, all of a sudden there's a close-up of the earrings on her ears, which is a great way to sort of tell that story. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about the three little girls and the shooting and arranging of those scenes? Like, did you just get the girls together and say, go play in a barn, go do this, and then just follow them? Or have you scripted some kind of idea out for yourself? Or how did those
in case you didn't hear it in the back, it's a question about the three girls, and I guess all your shooting with them, if it was all improvisational, how you set it up with them.
Some of it was improv and some of it was scripted. I mean, this barn is like my favorite place in the whole world, and they recently tore it down, but it's a place that I would walk by every single day of my life. So I would take these kids there and say, pretend you're horses, or pretend, whatever they're doing at the moment. So that was kind of loose and open, but like the chicken dinner, we set that up at their house with their family, and their family made dinner for us, and so it was scripted, but not necessarily scripted.
And how much time in with them in particular? We can talk about various other characters too, but it's interesting to talk about those three girls. Like, did you shoot all their scenes sort of at once together, or did you come back to them?
No, we shot we shot all over during the few months that the 3 weeks that we were there the first summer, and then the 2 weeks the next summer. So it was very spread out, yeah.
And did they enjoy? I mean, it's interesting too, because I was thinking particularly about the young kids too. It's like, they can be just great at improvisation and things. Tell them, pretend you're doing this, and then they just do it. Like,
yeah. Oh, that girl, the cat girl that was doing the cat
girl
thing.
Was great.
She actually thought she was her mom was like, she thinks she's a cat, and she gets stuck doing this, and I can't get her to stop. And so we would have her, and she just unabashedly would do whatever in front of the camera for us, as well as the 4-year-old little girl, Rainey, who was in the movie. She would do whatever we asked of her, and we never really had problems with them looking at the cameras. I think that's also a testament to Adam's camera work and child social skills. I don't know. They all loved him, though, and I think that's obvious in the movie, that nobody feels like they're being watched or,
Yeah, it is. There's just this sort of warmth to sort of everything that goes on. Let's see. Over there.
How did you actually finish it? I mean, how did you have everything it took to actually go from the beginning to we watched it?
So yeah, how did you finish it? Right, you didn't exactly have it storyboarded. But you knew what you wanted to see, or did at one point you go, all right, we have enough stuff, or?
Yeah, we shot for a long time. We shot for a while, and then it was really hard. I wanted to edit it myself, but I've never edited something this big, and it was a huge process trying to figure out how to make what I had seen at the beginning, because I really think that what came out of this in the end is exactly what I went into it wanting to make, and what Adam and I had talked about for 3 years now or whatever. But it took a little while to figure out how to get that across. I work in film, and I understand filmic language, and I understand how things are shot and why you shoot reverse shots of dialogue and why there's dialogue in movies. And without utilizing any of that, it was hard to figure out what I was falling back on to make everything make sense enough to have you sit through it, I guess. So it was definitely a process. I think I edited a much more narrative version of it, and then realized that all of the important things had been left out when the story was the forefront of the film. So I went back and ended up sort of completely taking that apart and making it into this weird, poetic, crazy thing that didn't make sense. And then I ended up sort of combining those things, and that's how I got back to this.
Very nicely done. I thought there was somebody up here.
I did, but it was the edit question.
It was that question. It was the edit question.
It was hard, though. It took a long time.
I can imagine, And how long, well, and you did it sort of over and over again, because how long was that process? Or were you doing any of it while you were shooting the film?
I didn't do any of it while I was shooting the film, but I did end up using pretty much everything we shot. It wasn't like we shot hours and hours more footage than this. This is pretty much it. I mean, there's maybe a couple of scenes here and there that were lost in the end, but it took a couple of years. I think we shot in 2012 and 2013, and then I just finished it in January.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's amazing, because I was going to ask you at one point, especially if you're shooting some things that are nonfiction, but then you also there's usually this, huge amount of stuff that is shot that is not used. That's incredibly amazing and judicious of you that that just about everything is used, and especially in this kind of film, where it's not so, set up at the beginning.
Yeah, I think the thing that helped maybe in that was that I talked to Adam a lot about not making something that was too poetic in the end. I didn't want to like sit on poetic moments or say like we're gonna watch the girl's hands in the frame or something, which we catch glimpses of, but none of it's ever really pointed out, which I think is the nice part. And we were shooting in this beautiful place, but I kept saying I don't want there to be just beautiful nature shots. I don't want it to be focused on that. So it wasn't like, oh, let's go shoot a bunch of beautiful trees or animals or anything like that. It was very specific what we were looking for.
The poetry is sort of in the everyday life
Yeah.
in this place. Because the landscape does have a great part in it, but you're right, you're not just sort of sitting, wallowing in the landscape, it's just there.
Right.
Somebody, yes?
Why did you start with the image of the dead animal?
Oh yeah, why did you start with the image of the dead animal? I keep forgetting that, and every time I see it, I go, right, there's this dead animal there.
I think it sets up a nice tone to the film that's a little bit confusing, just like the rest of the film. I mean, I think the point of this, if there is a point, is that life is confusing and that there's not one set answer to things and you can't see things from one point of view. And I bike a lot in Montana in the summer and walk a lot, and there are just miles and miles and miles of dead animals in the bar ditches of these of these roads. So I really wanted a lot of dead animals in the movie to begin with. So my little brother would call me up and be like, I saw this giant bird squished at the end of the highway. Go pick it up. So my mom's freezer was filled with dead animals. I mean, it's just nice set against this beauty, there were times in the summer I'd be walking down a dirt road in the middle of nowhere and I would watch a bird die in front of me or something. It's something that you sort of get used to being in that place. And you see a lot more, I mean, here you see pigeons and stuff walking around, but I feel like there you're a lot more connected to that kind of thing.
Well, how many people who grew up like outside of a city? I mean, I grew up in the suburbs, but when we had a pet cemetery, we'd find these dead things on the road and haul them home and dig a hole. So it happens everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, over here.
Hi. I was very touched by the Russian young man and his mother. Could you talk a little bit about their relationship and are they really mother and son? It was such a beautiful.
Yes, talk about the Russian mother and son.
We met this woman. I was looking for people to be in the film, and I was at like an old folks home in Montana. And this woman, woman who was running it was in this crazy fit because there was a water leak or something. So she was trying to help me, but she also couldn't help me. So she was like doing all this stuff. And then suddenly outside the door, this Russian woman walked by speaking in Russian and blowing kisses to everyone and laughing so hard through the hallways. And I was like, I have to find this woman and get her to be in the movie. But the problem was she didn't speak English at all, really. So I found her and I was like, we're making a movie. Will you let us come in your apartment? And she was like, yes, come. So she was making us tea and showing us photos of Russia on the internet. And she talked to us for hours and was singing to us in her apartment. And we had no idea what she was saying. So we had Hillary come and shoot with her for a while. And it was so beautiful. And I thought that it really tied in to what the film was about missing the place that you're from and remembering things in a certain way. And so we thought that we had to go back and shoot with her. And then Alex, who's an old friend of mine, really wanted to be a part of the film, and it was really hard for me to decide if it would make sense or not because he's a much more well-known actor than any of these people. So for a long time I was like, I don't know, it doesn't make sense. But then I found this Russian woman, and he speaks Russian, so we thought it would be really great and the right fit to bring him back with us the second summer. And then he went and we shot with her, and he helped us translate that time, so we knew what was going on. We could tell her what we wanted a little bit more.
And then actually, it's very interesting because it just turns out to be, as you say, such really interesting characters, and the vibe and the feelings between the two of them was just lovely.
I've been asked a lot of times if that's Alex's real mom, so that feels good to know that it seems that way.
Well, that's the thing, because of all these things And you, I mean, you don't spend a lot of time because it really, basically film takes you over. But it is kind of, do they know each other or do they not? And yes, I think it's a great testament to all of you that, people ask that question. And it's really interesting because a lot of times you see people, all of a sudden you'll see, some more well-known actor in a film, and sometimes they're in there because, that's how you get money, that's how you do that, or because they know them. I think it's really interesting that you found this place for him. And I think it's just kind of a hoot. All of a sudden in the middle of this film you go, oh wait, among all these people, there he is. So yes, right there.
Actually, I was thinking that the movie really transitioned for me at that moment where he comes into her apartment. Like all of a sudden, personally, I just felt a total shift in that movie in a nice way. Like you started to see a connection happening somewhere in the film between people that actually knew each other. But my question was about the soundtrack or the music. For the most part, there was a lot of lovely melodic music, but a couple times there's this sharp, cutoff of sound that this was a bit more jarring, I felt, and I was wondering decision making about sound for this.
So the question is, yes, if you can talk about the sound and the kind of music and your decisions in, yes, when things are cut off and there's jarring music.
We edited a lot to some really beautiful music, and then I kept thinking, where am I going to find something that's this great that I can possibly use without paying $1 bazillion? And I ended up finding Paul Grimstad, who's here somewhere. I don't know. He's in the back. He's the most amazing person ever in the world.
Everyone
should go talk to him.
He's all the way back there.
An actor and a musician and the smartest man I've met. So he ended up composing a bunch of the melodic music for us. And I think that music I chose because it feels a little bit alien and it feels a little bit outside of the world, and I think it's nice to view this different culture and this world as a whole set to that soundtrack. I think it feels like it fits in the end in a really strange way. And then the sound cutting off, I think, was just more, not being too poetic with things and not sitting in things too long, and realizing that things are beautiful, but also there are other things going on.
And I also noticed a few things. I noticed like Dusty Springfield and a couple of things like from back in the 60s, I guess, but very, very little snippets of them, which I presume are sort of ambient sound, supposedly coming from a radio or something, perhaps, and very short because then you don't have to pay. I mean,
We're getting
it makes sense. That makes sense. But it also then speaks to, the characters and the scene to have these little snippets of that sound in there.
All of that music, I know I probably won't be able to keep it someday, but all of the music in the film is like songs that my mom would sing to me when I was a kid growing up, or that her mom would sing to her. So it all means a lot, but it's music on radios.
Well, exactly. That's exactly what it sounded like. Yes.
You said you had a much more narrative version that you were working with originally. What do you like most about leaving that behind?
So this is a question about what do you like most about having left the narrative behind?
I don't ever see it as a process of leaving it behind necessarily. I mean, I think it was the same thing as starting with this really simple story about a woman and a guy coming through town and then leaving, and what happened in that span is more interesting than that story in particular. I think it's all still in there. It's just opened up a lot. So I don't think I ever really left it behind. But I think it also feels good to be able to experience a culture in a way that, I've lived in different places. I lived in Minnesota, and I feel like the way I experienced that culture, I never said, what do you feel about your culture and why is it different than where I came from? But in experiencing everyone's little views of it, I think you get a big picture, and I hope that is what this tells you, more than like this woman's sad and a guy came through town.
Now, I just want to ask, and then I think we may have to end, but I want to ask about Paul's poetry, which just speaks to so many things. Was the poetry used, was it written for the film, or was this poetry that he had already written that you incorporated into the story?
He wrote some of it beforehand for the movie. I told him what I was looking for, and then he also wrote some of it later on as we got closer to finishing. So and then some of it he had written beforehand, so it's a little bit of a mix.
Well, as I said, I think this film is sort of just, the epitome of these kinds of what we bring together, which is narrative, which is non-narrative. It tells an incredible story with great characters, and how you put them all together is great. And also, I was reading something, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, and they were talking about, a lot of the films and new directors, you're not in the usual spaces like, Brooklyn, et cetera, although we do have films that take place in Brooklyn, so don't worry. But I do think that you have not just shown us a new place, but shown us but also a familiar place at the same time. It's just a great work. Thanks so much for making it and for having it here.
Oh, thank you so much for coming to see it.
Thank you, everyone.